Hello and welcome back to my channel, The Future Empress. My name is Anna and today I'm gonna do the mid-year book freakout tag. So I thought this would be a fun video to do to sum up my favorite disappointments and some other books that I didn't talk about more in depth during my wrap-up. I have my cup of chocolate chai latte, so let's just get into the questions. I have only read 18 books this year, so I don't have so many books to choose from. However, I am currently in the middle of these 6 books. Most of them are just books that I started last year that I couldn't end up finishing before I went to South Korea. The book that I've been currently reading for the longest time is Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. This is the 3rd book in the Dark Artifices? I don't know how to pronounce the series name. I started reading this back in February 2019, I think, and I'm not even halfway through. You can see there's some tabs until here, so I'm like not even 1/3. I was reading The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater in November, and then the season began, and I put it down in favor of reading the other books on my TBR, and then I never picked it up again before I went to South Korea. I was reading Serpent and Dove during the Fairy Loot readathon, because this is the Fairy Loot edition, so I thought to join the Fairy Loot readathon for Serpent and Dove, but I never managed to finish because work, I guess, life got in the way. And then I have Sherlock Holmes, not this entire thing, like yes, I'm currently reading this entire thing, that's true, but I was reading The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I only read the first 3 short stories, I think, so I'm just gonna restart The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes for the Reading Rush TBR and hopefully finish it. And then, because one of my goals last year was to read more classics, hence the Sherlock Holmes one, but I was also reading The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and other stories. So I finished reading The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that is this bit, and then I came to The Suicide Club and just stopped, put it down, because I was like, oh, I had to think about The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde before I continued on with his other stories, but then I never picked it back up again, which is a common theme with these books. The last book on here is actually a book that I started in 2020. So I started listening to the audiobook of History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. Started this one in late February, and I just couldn't get into the audiobook, and I knew that I had to physically read it. So I put down the audiobook, and then when I came back home a week ago, I decided to pick it up and read it physically. So I started from the beginning, and now I'm almost halfway through this. And hopefully this one I will like finish in a couple of days. But the other books, maybe. The first question is the best book you've read so far in 2020. For me, that one is The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. This is just so nostalgic to read, even though it's not a story that I knew of. The world and the magic system and just the overall feel of the book that you get from it is so nostalgic to the Avatar and the Last Airbender series, and maybe that is making me a bit biased towards the book, but I tried to judge it as objectively as I could, even though if I hadn't watched the Avatar and the Last Airbender as a kid and only as a grown adult, I think I still would enjoy this story and give this book 5 out of 5 stars, because it's just so good. It's fantasy, it's Avatar, and it's queer. Like, honestly, what more do you want? The next question is the best sequel you've read in 2020 so far. And the best sequel I've read in 2020, not counting my rereads, is The Hand on the Wall by Mahurin. It is technically the last book in the series, but still counts as a sequel. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars and really enjoyed it. I really liked how it wrapped everything up, but still keeping you intrigued in the story. However, there weren't many other sequels to compete against it, so... The third question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. And that book for me is King and the Dragonflies by Cassandra. This is a middle grade about a 12-year-old boy that thinks that his brother has turned into a dragonfly. It sounds like having a similar plot like The Astonishing Color of After, I think it's called. I haven't read that one, but it also deals with the same topics that I think this one is gonna deal with. But however, this one is also LGBTQIA+, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Hopefully it will be in my bookstores. The fourth question is my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And that one for me is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is a book that Kayla from Books and Lala recommended. Even before that, I had marked it on my 2020 release shelf on Goodreads, but after hearing her rave about it, I got even more excited for it. This is a story about a boy that accidentally resurrects a ghost, I think. That ghost and him ends up having some kind of relationship. I'm not saying it's gonna be a romantic relationship, and it just sounds very interesting and kind of refreshing, and it's also LGBTQI plus QIA plus. I can't wait for it to come out. The fifth question is your biggest disappointment. If you've seen my wrap-up video, you will know that this book is going to be P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. I enjoyed the first book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars and I wanted to continue with the story. However, when I read this one, I was disappointed. I gave it 2 out of 3 stars, so there's only 1 star difference between them, so it might not be that big of a disappointment. It was different from the first book in a lot of ways, I think, even though it's still like teenage drama and stuff like that. It felt like the books, like the series, could have been a duology, and all the drama in this one could have been split up in book 1 and book 3. So it was only 2 books, because I felt like reading this one was just a filler book to get on to the next one, and that's why it was a very disappointing read. The sixth question is my biggest surprise, and that one for me is Me, Elton John by Elton John. This is an autobiography of Elton John's life, and I've never read or listened to an autobiography before. That's why I count it as a surprise, because I didn't know how I would feel about it. I didn't know if I would be able to listen along or if I would get bored, since it's non-fiction and I've not been dwelling much in non-fiction lately. And that's why it was like a big surprise for me, because I really enjoyed it and gave it obviously 5 out of 5 stars, but also just his life was so interesting and mesmerizing, and it was told in a very interesting way. Taron Egerton narrated so well, and I just really loved it. The seventh question is favorite new author, debut or new to me, and I am gonna go with Christine Lambert, the author of The Boy in the Red Dress. The Boy in the Red Dress was her debut novel, and I really loved that one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I am very excited to see what she puts out next, to see if she's gonna become a new favorite of mine. The 8th question is newest fictional crush. I don't usually get fictional crushes, however, Ranji in The Rise of Kyoshi was everything. I just really loved her character and how loyal and devoted she was to Kyoshi, and still being a freaking badass. I couldn't help but get a little crush on her while I was reading this book, and I can't wait for The Shadow of Kyoshi to see what happened next with her and everyone else in this book. The 9th question is your newest favorite character, and that's also gonna be characters from The Rise of Kyoshi, but this time it's gonna be Kyoshi and Laoji. The thing about these two, they remind me of Katniss and Haymitch. Like, their dynamic and their like roles and relationship really reminded me on Katniss and Haymitch's relationship. I reread The Hunger Games this year, so their relationship is very fresh in my mind. Kyoshi and Laoji really gave me the same vibes, and that's one of my favorite relationships in books, like mentor and pupil, where it's like kind of sassy. They act like they hate each other, but they actually care about each other. And that's why I'm choosing both of them as my newest favorite characters, because together they make each other better. Doesn't always have to be a romantic relationship for you to be a better person. And then the 10th question is a book that made you cry, but there's not been a book that made me cry yet this year, so let's skip to the next. And that's a book that made you happy. This is not gonna come as a shocker since I've mentioned this book a couple of times already in this video, and that is The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. This book made me happy because of nostalgic reasons, as I mentioned earlier. I just really felt happy to be back in this world in a different format. I was hesitant because it was another format. It was not a visual animated series. It was a novel, but I shouldn't have worried because I loved it and it was nostalgic and it just made me happy. Even though sad things were happening, like I almost cried in a part in this book, but it still made me happy. The 12th question is the most beautiful book you've bought this year or received. I have a limited of books I can choose for this one. Nevertheless, I really love this cover. It's one of my favorites so far this year, and that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. I just really like the color scheme of this one and the hair with leaves. It gives you like an autumn feel and it's just very, very pretty in my opinion. The 13th and final question is, what books do you need to read before the end of the year? And I have a couple of books here. Mostly it's sequels that I want to get to. So obviously I want to finish all the books that I'm currently reading. That goes without saying. But particularly this one. I really, really need to finish this one before the end of the year. If I don't, and it end up being February 2021, I have been reading this for 2 years and I can't let that happen, so I really need to finish this one before the end of the year. Another book that I really want to finish before the end of the year is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I've heard a lot of great things about this book, but particularly the plotline and story and the message in this book is a message that I think I am a place in my life that I really need to hear. I really feel like I need to read this one. I don't know why. It's just calling to me. And then the last book before I talk about all the sequels I need to finish this year, I want to read Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. So I watched the TV show, really, really loved it, except the last couple of episodes of the last season. We're just gonna forget about that. But that's why I really want to get into Game of Thrones books. I have all of them up until A Dance with Dragons, so I can just binge read them. But they're big and they're adult, so I think they will take me a while to finish. However, I need to start somewhere. And then I have 4 sequels that I feel like I need to read before the end of the year. I have a lot of more sequels on my TBR, but these are my most prioritized sequels. The first one is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. Last year I started listening to the audiobooks of Throne of Glass, and this is the next book that I have to read. The next one is Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. I really, really love this series and I honestly don't know why I didn't continue with it when I got this. I even pre-ordered it 2 years ago. But I need to continue because I have the 4th book. What is it called? Something with the devil. I don't remember. And then one of my all-time favorite books ever is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. That's why I really want to read The Lady's Guide to Piracy and Petticoats. No, it's switch. The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee. The last book is The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. I've slowly been making my way through Rick Riordan's books, and the next book I have to read is The Son of Neptune. And yeah, they're fun. And I want to continue with the series. So that's it for the tag. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and see you soon. Bye!